That evening should have been completely ordinary, the kind of quiet Thursday that fades from memory before the week is even over. But something felt off. She stood near the doorway, adjusting her earrings before lightly misting perfume along her neck. The scent drifted across the room, familiar yet distant at the same time. What caught my attention most wasn't the perfume, though, it was the dress. A black one I hadn't seen her wear in months. It fit her a little too perfectly, like it had been chosen with more intention than she wanted me to notice. "I'm meeting the girls," she said casually, barely looking at me. "Just dinner, I need to clear my head a bit." Her tone was light, practiced, too smooth. She added something about stress, about needing to talk, about life getting overwhelming. But not once did she mention us. Not once did she acknowledge the growing silence between us, the quiet distance that had been stretching further every day. And maybe, on any other day, I would have accepted it without question. But not this time. Earlier that afternoon I had seen something I wasn't meant to see. Her tablet lit up while she was in the shower, just a glance at first, then another. A name I didn't recognize, messages that didn't feel innocent, compliments that went beyond friendly, calling her beautiful, bold, irresistible, the kind of words that don't belong in casual conversation. And her replies, they matched the tone. It didn't take much to piece it together. A guy from the gym judging by the context, someone new, someone who clearly wasn't just a passing acquaintance. And now she was meeting friends. I watched her grab her purse, give one last look in the mirror and head for the door. "Don't wait up," she added lightly. Then she was gone. The soft click of the door echoed louder than it should have, leaving behind only the faint trace of her perfume, and a silence filled with everything she didn't say. That's when it finally settled in. She wasn't going out with friends. She was going to see him. I stayed where I was for a while after the door closed, staring at nothing in particular, listening to the silence settle around me. For weeks, something inside me had been tightening, small doubts, quiet disappointments, things I kept brushing aside because it felt easier than facing them. But now, everything was clear. There was no confusion left, no room for excuses. I could have gone after her. I could have called, demanded answers, forced her to admit what I already knew. Part of me even imagined it, catching her in a lie, watching her scramble to explain. It would have been easy to turn the night into a confrontation. But I didn't move. Because the truth was, I was tired. Tired of asking questions that never got honest answers. Tired of pretending not to notice things that were right in front of me. Tired of holding onto something that was already slipping away. At some point, without even realizing when it happened, I had stopped fighting for us. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. So instead of chasing her, I let her go. If she wanted to spend her evening with someone else, that was her choice. I wasn't going to stand there and beg for attention that should have been given freely. For the first time in a long while, I asked myself a different question. What do I want to do tonight? The answer came quietly, but it felt right. I didn't want to sit alone in that empty house, replaying everything in my head. I didn't want to wait for her to come back and pretend nothing had happened. No, if this night was going to mean something, it wouldn't be about her. It would be about me choosing something better. That was the moment everything shifted. I reached for my phone, not to call her, not to argue or accuse, but to call someone who had always been honest with me, even when it was uncomfortable. Someone who actually saw what was going on. Emily. I stared at her name on my phone for a few seconds before pressing call. Emily. Out of everyone in that family, she was the only one who never pretended things were fine when they clearly were. She had a way of noticing the smallest cracks, the subtle shifts most people ignored. More than once she had quietly warned me, never pushing, never interfering too much, just making sure I wasn't completely blind to what was happening around me. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she picked up. "Hey, Chris," her voice carried a hint of surprise, but it was warm, genuine in a way I hadn't heard in a while. "Everything okay?" I hesitated just for a moment, not because I didn't know what to say, but because saying it out loud would make it real. "She's out tonight," I said finally. A pause followed, not confusion, not shock. Maury like confirmation. Emily let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, I figured." That hit harder than I expected. It meant I hadn't been the only one seeing it, I just hadn't wanted to admit it. "You all right?" she asked softly. Such a simple question, but it landed straight in my chest. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand over my face. Honestly, no. The honesty surprised even me. I don't want to sit here alone tonight," I added, my voice quieter now. "I can't do that." There was a brief silence on the other end, not awkward, just thoughtful. And then, before I could second-guess myself, the words slipped out. "Would you have dinner with me?" The moment stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, as if the answer mattered more than I was ready to admit. But Emily didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said gently. "Where do you want to meet?" No judgment, no awkward questions, no lecture about boundaries or consequences. Just a presence. I exhaled, tension I hadn't even noticed leaving my body. "There's a place not far from here," I said, naming a quiet restaurant nearby. "Nothing fancy, just somewhere calm." "Sounds perfect," she replied. "Give me about an hour." "Yeah," I said, "that works." We hung up shortly after, but the silence that followed felt different now. Lighter, like something had shifted, even if only slightly. For the first time that night, I didn't feel completely alone. After the call, I didn't waste time. I headed straight to the bathroom, turning on the shower hotter than usual, letting the water wash over me as if it could rinse away the weight of the past few weeks. For the first time in a while, I paid attention to how I looked, shaved carefully, chose a clean shirt, added just a touch of cologne. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about remembering who I used to be. By the time I arrived at the restaurant, the sky had already darkened, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the windows. Inside, everything felt calm, low lighting, quiet conversations, the faint clink of glasses. And she was already there. Emily sat near the window, hands resting lightly on the table. Her posture relaxed but composed. She looked up the moment I walked in, and for a second, everything else faded into the background. She had always been beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention. But tonight there was something different, effortless, real, a simple dress, her hair falling naturally over her shoulders, her expression open and unguarded. When she saw me, she stood immediately. "Hey," she said softly. Before I could respond, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a quick, polite hug. It was steady, grounding. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until that exact moment. "Hey," I replied quietly, returning it. When we pulled apart, there was no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding as we took our seats across from each other. We ordered a bottle of wine, something neither of us really thought about too much. It wasn't about the food or the drinks. It was about the space, the chance to breathe, to speak without walking on eggshells. At first, the conversation was light. Work, daily routines, small things that felt safe. But it didn't stay there for long. Eventually, I told her everything. About the messages, the excuses, the growing distance. The way Julia had been slowly pulling away while pretending everything was normal. I didn't hold anything back, not the frustration, not the confusion, not the quiet hurt that had been building up over time. Emily didn't interrupt. She just listened. Really listened. And whenever I paused, unsure how to continue, her hand would rest gently over mine for a second, just enough to remind me I wasn't alone in that moment. I had expected sympathy, maybe even pity. But what I got instead was something stronger. Respect. "You didn't imagine it," she said at one point, her voice calm but firm. "You saw exactly what was happening." That mattered more than she probably realized. When the food arrived, I noticed something unexpected. I was actually hungry. Not just physically, but in a deeper way. Hungry for conversation that felt real, for connection that didn't feel forced. We talked more after that. About her work, about the changes she'd been wanting to make in her life, about things that had nothing to do with Julia or the mess waiting outside those walls. She laughed at one of my dumb jokes, and it caught me off guard. Not because the joke was good, but because the laughter was real. And before I knew it, I was laughing too. Not the polite kind, not the forced kind. The kind that comes from somewhere honest. Time slipped by without either of us noticing. By the time we reached dessert, something had shifted between us, not in a dramatic way but quietly, naturally. Like two people who had finally stopped pretending and started seeing each other clearly. After dessert, we lingered over coffee, neither of us wanting the night to end. The world outside had faded into a blur, leaving only the soft hum of conversation from nearby tables and the quiet rhythm of our own breaths. Emily leaned slightly closer, brushing a stray crumb from my lips. The touch was gentle, casual, but it sparked something in me I hadn't felt in months. Desire, warmth, the aching reminder that I could still be seen, still matter. I looked at her and something shifted. Words weren't needed, we didn't have to explain, she just knew. Slowly, tentatively at first, she closed the distance between us. Her lips pressed against mine, not a timid peck, not a polite brush, but a kiss that carried honesty, hunger, and the weight of everything we'd both felt for so long. I kissed her back with the same intensity, letting the years of neglect, loneliness, and frustration pour out in that single, consuming moment. It wasn't just physical, it was reclamation. Proof that I could feel alive again, that I could choose someone who saw me fully. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads resting together, her cheeks flushed, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "Let's go home." My heart thundered, every beat echoing the truth I'd been holding back. I nodded, letting her take the lead, knowing that nothing about this night was ordinary. In the car, we didn't speak much. The silence wasn't awkward, it was calm, full of expectation, like standing on the edge of something inevitable. The city lights passed by in streaks, and I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and peace. Arriving home, I opened the door for her, watching her step inside first. The moment we crossed the threshold, it felt like a reset, a chance to leave the past behind, even if only for a few hours. We moved to the living room, lit a small fire in the hearth, and sank into the couch. Emily curled into my lap, warm and steady, and when our lips met again, it was no longer about longing. It was a promise, soft, patient, certain, that neither of us would ever allow ourselves to feel invisible again. The fire crackled, the night stretched on, and for the first time in a long time I felt human, whole, seen. Once we were inside, the familiar weight of the house hit me, the quiet corners, the shadows of routines long abandoned, but tonight it felt different. The air seemed lighter, freer, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emily settled onto the couch beside me, curling close in a way that felt natural and unforced. Her presence was warm, grounding, a steady reminder that I wasn't alone. I draped an arm around her, letting her lean into me, and for the first time in months, I felt a kind of peace that had nothing to do with pretense or obligation. We didn't rush. There were no scripts, no expectations. We simply existed in the quiet crackle of the fire, letting the warmth spread through us. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining easily, and I realized how much I had missed touch that felt genuine, uncalculating. The conversation drifted lightly at first, childhood memories, silly stories, trivial observations, but even in these small exchanges there was honesty. For the first time in ages, I could speak without holding back, without fearing judgment or dismissal. Eventually, I felt her shift in my lap, tilting her head to rest on my shoulder. The small, subtle movements of comfort, trust, and quiet intimacy reminded me that connection wasn't about grand gestures. It was about being present, being seen, and being allowed to be human. Outside, the wind rattled against the windows, a distant reminder that the world beyond these walls still held lies and complications. But inside, it felt contained, irrelevant. Here in this room, the night belonged to us. Emily looked up at me, her clear blue eyes meeting mine with something unspoken but understood. "Do you regret this?" she asked softly, her voice careful, vulnerable. I paused, feeling the weight of the question, the years of uncertainty and betrayal pressing in. Then I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. "No," I said, finally letting the truth resonate. "I regret a lot of things, but not this, not being here with someone who actually sees me." She smiled, faint and grateful, and leaned forward to press her lips to mine once more, slow, deliberate, unyielding. That kiss carried all the tension, pain, and longing we had kept hidden. It was affirmation. It was reclamation. It was real. For the first time in months, I felt solid, seen, wanted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed in something honest again. The quiet of the night shattered with the familiar crunch of tires on the gravel outside. Emily tensed beside me, and I knew immediately who it was. Julia. Her heels clicked sharply across the hardwood as she unlocked the door, and the faint trace of perfume drifted through the living room, like a warning, sharp and intrusive. She must have expected me to be asleep, maybe hopping to slip back unnoticed, to preserve her carefully constructed story of innocence. But she wasn't going to find that tonight. When she stepped into the room, the scene that met her eyes must have burned. Emily curled in my lap, warm and unafraid, my arm resting around her waist. The fire crackled, casting golden light over her face, faces of two people who were present, real and untouchable by pretense. Julia froze in the doorway, purse half dangling, eyes wide with confusion and fury. Her mouth opened but no words came, just a strangled gasp as if the truth itself had struck her. Emily didn't move, calm, proud, steady. Then she kissed me again, slow, deliberate, unyielding, right in front of Julia. Every rehearsed excuse, every lie Julia had carried with her that night, shredded under the weight of that single moment. Finally, Julia found her voice. "Chris, what the hell is this?" Her tone cracked, wavering between anger and disbelief. I stayed seated calm. "A real date," I said, "one you seem to have forgotten how to have." Emily lifted her chin, unshaken. Julia's shock shifted to fury and her cheeks flushed a bright, angry red. She clutched her purse, voice rising. "Emily, how could you?" Emily's response was quiet, unshakable and devastating in its precision. "Because you don't deserve him. You never did." Julia's shoulders sagged. Her carefully constructed mask was gone, replaced by raw, naked shock. She had lost the game before she even realized she was playing. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't need to. Emily's presence alone grounded me, reminding me that I was no longer trapped in the cycle of deception. Julia was furious, but she was powerless. The room was silent, except for the soft crackle of the fire and Julia's shallow, uneven breaths. She finally stepped back, defeated, as if the reality of her own choices had struck her too hard to fight against. In that moment I realized something I had longed to feel for months. I didn't need Julia's approval, her lies, or her presence to define me anymore. I had chosen honesty. I had chosen Emily, and that choice was mine and only mine to hold. Julia lingered for a moment, her body tense, eyes darting between us as if searching for some opening, some crack she could exploit. She took a shaky step forward, voice quivering with fury and desperation. "Chris, you can't be serious," she hissed. This with my sister, it means nothing. You're just trying to hurt me." I didn't flinch. My arm remained steady around Emily's waist, grounding both of us. "No, Julia," I said calmly, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm not trying to hurt you, I'm moving on. You made that impossible the moment you walked away." Emily mirrored my resolve, shifting slightly, meeting Julia's gaze head-on. "You left him," she said, every word deliberate. "I didn't, I'm not leaving." Julia's composure cracked. Tears welled, running down her cheeks as her voice rose in shrill desperation. "You can't just replace me," she screamed, anger and disbelief lacing every syllable. I remained still, steady, and said nothing more. I didn't need to. Emily's calm presence beside me was louder than any words Julia could muster. The firelight flickered across the room, highlighting the contrast between the chaos Julia brought and the quiet certainty Emily offered. Julia's shoulders slumped, her posture shrinking under the weight of her own unraveling lies. She realized finally that she had no control here, not anymore. Her voice softened, cracking now with a mix of rage and the first threads of fear. I didn't think you'd actually do this," she whispered, almost to herself. Emily leaned closer to me, thumb brushing my cheek gently, a quiet anchor in the storm. "That's your problem," she said softly, firm enough for Julia to hear. "You never thought anyone would stand up to you." Julia's gaze wavered, the fight draining from her. She tried one last time, clinging to scraps of authority. "Chris, please, I can change, we can fix this." I shook my head slowly, resolute. "No, we're done, there's nothing left to fix." The words hung in the room like a verdict. Julia slumped further, defeated, the facade of control shattered completely. For the first time I saw her for what she truly was, a small, frightened person hiding behind arrogance and manipulation. But there was no space left for pity in me. I had given up carrying the weight of her consequences. Emily pressed close again, grounding me in the moment. "Come on," she whispered, and together we moved to the fire, leaving Julia to her defeat. The night had shifted. The power dynamic in the house had changed irrevocably. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living, with someone beside me who saw me, who refused to let me sink again. The first light of dawn crept through the blinds, casting a soft gold across Emily's hair as she slept curled against my chest. The fire had burned down to grey ash hours ago, yet the house felt warmer than it had in years. I stayed still for a long moment, breathing in the calm, half expecting Julia to appear, ready with excuses or demands. But there was only quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like freedom. Emily stirred, blinking open her eyes, and for the first time in a long while I saw a peace in her gaze. No regrets, no lingering tension, just the quiet understanding of being truly present. She reached up, brushing my jaw, and smiled softly. "Morning," she whispered, as if the world itself had been reborn overnight. "Morning," I replied, letting my voice carry the steadiness I had craved for months. We sat tangled together for a while, listening to the house breathe. No screaming, no suspicion, no tension-filled silences, just stillness like a wound that had finally begun to heal. Emily's eyes met mine, unspoken questions lingering, but neither of us needed words. Right now wasn't about digging up the past, it was about choosing calm, choosing each other. Eventually I offered to make breakfast. She laughed softly, the sound filling the kitchen like sunlight. "I'll help, but only if you promise not to burn the place down," she teased. Side by side we moved around the kitchen with ease. I cracked eggs while she buttered toast. She laughed when I spilled coffee grounds across the counter. I teased her back when she nearly dropped a plate. For the first time in years, our laughter was unforced, full and healing. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. A single text from Julia, "We need to talk." I stared at it for a moment, feeling nothing, just a dull, distant echo. Emily caught my gaze and placed her hand over mine. "You don't have to," she reminded me gently. "Not today." I nodded, grateful for her steadiness, and set the phone aside. The day was ours, and no one was taking it from us. Later, we decided to go for a walk, windows down, the spring air warm against our faces. We wandered through a nearby flea market, laughing at odd vinyl records and pointing out quirky antiques. I realized how much I had dreamed of building a life again, this time rooted in honesty and trust. Emily picked a small potted plant with tiny yellow flowers, promising to keep it at my place. That little plant felt like a quiet promise, unspoken but weighty. When we returned home, Julia's car was in the driveway. My stomach tightened, an old reflex, but I pushed it aside. Emily squeezed my hand, steady and unwavering. "You can do this," she whispered. I nodded. I knew I wasn't going back. That evening we sat by the fire again, side by side, letting the crackle of the logs speak for us. Emily leaned against me, breathing slow and even, and I closed my eyes, letting the calm settle. Tomorrow might bring complications, but tonight was ours. Peace at last. Emily stayed in the guest room that night, but before heading upstairs she wrapped me in a long, steady hug. It wasn't just warmth, it was a promise, a reassurance that I wasn't alone anymore. I lay awake for a while after she went up, listening to the house settle, the old echoes of Julia's manipulations replaced by something softer, something calm. Morning arrived quietly. I woke to the faint sound of humming coming from the kitchen. For a brief moment my mind drifted to mornings with Julia, those hollow routines etched into memory. But then Emily's soft voice and the scent of coffee and pancakes brought me fully back to the present. She stood there barefoot, hair loosely tied, wearing a pale blue t-shirt that seemed effortless, alive and real. She turned and smiled as I walked in. "Hope you're hungry," she teased, spatula in hand like a small sword. I laughed genuinely, starving in every sense of the word. Breakfast became a simple ritual, passing syrup, telling bad jokes, letting sunlight pour through the windows as if celebrating the small miracle of this morning. Halfway through my phone buzzed, a text from Julia, "We need to talk." I felt nothing this time, just a hollow echo of a past that no longer controlled me. Emily noticed and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to," she reminded me, and I didn't. The day unfolded gently. We decided to go for a drive with no destination, letting the breeze wash over us like a baptism. Emily led me to a small flea market she'd loved as a kid. We wandered the stalls, laughing at odd vinyl records, pointing out curious antiques, and even daydreaming about decorating a home again, a home built on truth, not pretense. She picked a tiny potted plant with yellow flowers, promising to keep it at my place, just for a while. It felt like hope in living form. When we returned, the house was quiet. Julia's car was gone. The silence wasn't empty, it was ours. Emily held my hand, unshakable. "If she wants to come back, you don't have to let her," she said softly. I nodded, steady, and smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. We spent the evening by the fire again, side by side, letting the crackle of the logs speak the words we didn't need to say. Emily rested her head on my shoulder, breathing calm and even, and I let the tension of the past days melt away. Tomorrow might bring questions, challenges, or the echoes of old lies, but tonight there was only peace. We ate dinner together, a simple pasta with tomato sauce, and talked about small, ordinary things, movies we'd missed, trips we dreamed of, songs we wanted to learn. The night stretched on quietly, warmly, like life was offering a second chance. I no longer felt like I was stealing happiness, I had earned it. When bedtime came, Emily asked if she could stay. I held her close, kissed her slowly, and promised her a place in my life for as long as she wanted. We curled beneath a blanket, listening to the rain tapping softly on the windows. My heart, for the first time in years, wasn't braced for betrayal. There was nothing left to fear, only the life we could build together. I closed my eyes knowing tomorrow might bring complications, but I would face them on my own terms, with someone beside me who truly saw me, who refused to let me sink again. If you've ever faced heartbreak, betrayal, or the sting of being unseen, take courage. The world may test you, but there's always the chance to find honesty, connection, and love worth holding on to.